everybody, I hope that you're all doing well. So today I am back to do part 2 of my little Hamilton book recommendations videos. If you are new to the channel, if you've only just stumbled upon this video now and you're thinking, what is she talking about? Basically, I have done a little 2-part series in which I am recommending books based on every single song in the musical Hamilton. I'd recommend that you watch the Act 1 videos that I did previously. I'll link them down in the description box for you. But yeah, basically I am taking every single song in the musical Hamilton and then basing a book recommendation on that song from the books that you see behind me, which does pose a bit of a challenge. As I mentioned previously, I do not typically read many books that are very explicitly to do with war or to do with government. So I have to get a little bit creative with these book recommendations. Some of these recommendations are going to be a little bit tenuous. Some of the links that I'm going to be making are going to require a few mental leaps to accept them, but I think it's all part of the fun. And I did bring this up in the previous video, but just a fair warning, there are going to be spoilers for Hamilton because I am going to be giving synopses for every single one of the songs and what they're about. So if you don't want to be spoiled for Hamilton, this is your warning now. So getting right back into the book recommendations, the first song in the second act of Hamilton is What Did I Miss? This song is where we are first introduced to Thomas Jefferson, who is back from France after being the ambassador for the USA there. And it's really at this point where we're starting to realise that things are not going to be all smooth sailing for Alexander Hamilton, that he is going to have a little bit of a rivalry going forward. So for this book recommendation, I really wanted to focus in on a story that has that kind of narrative of we were doing well and then you showed up and ruined everything for us. So with that in mind, I have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book tells a story of a fictional 70s band called The Six and kind of the turmoil and turbulent relationship that they have with a singer-songwriter, Daisy Jones, after their managers insist that they collaborate with her. And how this new band dynamic means that all of the relationships within the band start to deteriorate, and even though they are doing better than ever professionally, personally, their lives have been really deeply affected by this change. The second song in Act 2 of Hamilton is Cabinet Battle number 1. I really enjoy the cabinet battles. This is basically a little rap battle between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, where they are debating the topic of whether or not the capital should assume states' debts and whether or not they should establish a national bank. Jefferson is against, Hamilton is for, and it all just leads into chaos. For this book recommendation, I really wanted to go for a book where a debate was like a central climactic event within the story, and like I say, I don't tend to read many books that are to do with government, so this was kind of a hard ask for me. However, I did stumble across a book which has a debate right at the climax of the book, and it is the 6th book in the Princess Diaries series. Yay! So in this instalment of the Princess Diaries, Mia is up for class president, I think, which all culminates in her having to debate against Lana right at the end of the book. And Mia is really nervous about this idea of having to engage in school politics, and throughout the book she becomes more and more confident to the point where we get to the debate and she does so well. She's absolutely thriving. So yeah, this is my little fun recommendation for this particular song. The next song is Take a Break, where Hamilton is really struggling to think of a plan to get his debt plan through. Meanwhile, his family, particularly Angelica and Eliza, are really trying to press on him the importance of taking a break and going off for the summer with them. My dearest Angelica, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. I trust you'll understand the reference to another Scottish tragedy without my having to name the play. Yeah, this was the only recommendation that I could go for with this song because there are so many references to Macbeth throughout this song. So even though the plots are not necessarily aligned, you can definitely pick up Macbeth and see some of the references and just really savour them and enjoy them. The next song in Hamilton is Say No to This, and unfortunately, Hamilton does a bad here. So Hamilton is working really hard. He's working late hours trying to get his debt plan together and to convince Jefferson and Madison when who walks into his life but a young woman called Reynolds. And so Hamilton engages in an affair with her until he gets a letter from the woman's husband saying, hey, I know about the affair that you've been having with my wife. You need to pay me money or I will tell everyone. And so for this book recommendation, I really wanted to focus in on a book that is all about affairs and how messy and dodgy they are, and just don't do it. So the pick for that is Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. In this story, we see two friends slash ex-lovers, Bobby and Francis, as they interact with a married couple and start getting very, very personally involved in this married couple's lives. And disaster. It's not good. Do not have affairs with married people. No, 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 no. It's messy and annoying, and no, don't do it. Don't do it. The next song is a fan favourite of Hamilton, and it is The Room Where It Happens. In this song, we see Hamilton finally being able to convince Jefferson and Madison to accept his debt plan. Meanwhile, Aaron Burr is watching from the sidelines, being absolutely enraged about the fact that he never is able to get in on these big important political conversations, and he is desperate to be in the room where it happened and to have some sort of say in politics. And for this, I'm picking out a book from my unhaul pile. I never thought I'd end up recommending this book for anything, but it is We Have a Deal by Natalie Reynolds. This book is just basically all about how to negotiate with confidence, and yeah, I did read it and I thought it was good, but I'm not really into like businessy, negotiation-y kind of books. So back on the unhaul pile it goes, but you know, thank you for providing a service here. The next song in Hamilton is Schuyler Defeated, in which we find out that Aaron Burr has decided to campaign against Hamilton's father-in-law for a Senate seat, and he has won. He is now Senator Burr. And as you can imagine, Hamilton is quite enraged by this, that he has ousted his father-in-law's seat of power. This is one of the shorter songs in Hamilton, and I found it kind of hard to think of a song recommendation for this, but I decided instead to go on something where rivalry is a really strong aspect. I did think at first about going for The Valley of Fear by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, you know, another Sherlock Holmes, but this time where we see Moriarty, who is his big arch nemesis. But I thought instead to go for Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. In this book, we follow the character Yejide, who is married very, very happily, but unfortunately they have not had any children yet, and so her husband's family really pressure him to take a second wife. And so, as you can imagine, the dynamic between Yejide and this second wife is fraught. However, of course, they are living together. They are having to negotiate this bitter, bitter rivalry whilst interacting with each other every day, and it's just an absolutely, I would not want to be in this situation. And I think this really does link to how the musical really pit Hamilton and Burr against each other. In real life, they did not meet up quite as often as they seem to do in the musical, but I think for the major theme of the musical of how they are very, very similar but go down different paths, bringing them back and having them be in conflict with each other regularly really achieves that goal. Song number 7 in Act 2 of Hamilton is the second cabinet battle, in which Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton are debating whether or not the US should help the French in their fight against Britain. This was another book recommendation that was really, really hard to pin down, and I was trying to think of books especially that deal with the French Revolution, so I was really trying to rack my brains for this one because it was kind of hard, and I have gone for a book that I haven't actually read, and it is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, which I always feel like I hear people saying is the French Revolution novel. So unfortunately I cannot give you a full recommendation because I've not read it, but there you go. That is my option for this. This was a really, really hard one to try and pin down. The next song in Act 2 is Washington on Your Side. In this song, we see Thomas Jefferson, Aaron Burr, and James Madison lamenting how Hamilton seems to have Washington wrapped around his little finger and how much influence he holds as a result. We also see how they start to pry into Hamilton's personal life, trying to dig up dirt on him. And so for this, I wanted to pick up a book in which this concept of trying to bring somebody down a peg or two and try and reveal their secrets is a major theme. And for this book recommendation, I have The Secret History by Donna. This too focuses on a group who end up having a friend who is getting a bit too big for his boots, to put it mildly, and who decide they are going to knock him down a peg or two, and disastrous, murderous results occur. There's also the many, many layers of having secrets being uncovered throughout this story. So I think even though it is a very, very different plot to Washington on Your Side, you've got these major themes of secrets and trying to assert dominance really coming through in this book. So I highly recommend this. The next song in Hamilton Act 2 is One Last Time. This is one of my other top 5 songs in Hamilton. I adore this song, and Christopher Jackson has just got such a fantastic voice. Oh, listen to it right now, please, please, please. In this song, George Washington calls in Hamilton to tell him that he is not going to be running for a third term as president. He wants to retire, and Hamilton is just like, no, why? Why would you do this? So for this book recommendation, I really wanted to try and find a book that was about retirement, which I found really, really hard to do. I don't think I have a book that is explicitly about somebody making the decision to retire. Certainly I do have books that focus on somebody who is retired, but I've never read a book where their choice to retire has been a central theme. So instead, I decided to go for another Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I thought this one actually did fit for this particular song because it is an older woman reflecting on her very long career, her very long life, thinking about the things that went well in her career, the things that she did right, but also her regrets and the things that she did wrong, and trying to kind of reconcile that in her mind. I'm not going to go too deeply into those regrets because I would urge you all to read this. This was a fantastic book and this was quite a surprise favourite of last year for me. But yes, I'm going to pick this one for one last time. The next song in Act 2 of Hamilton is I Know Him, which is another King George song. In this, King George discovers that George Washington has decided to step down, and instead we have John Adams taking his place as the second president of the United States. And King George is full of glee at this news because he has met John Adams before and he thinks that he does not have what it takes. There was one particular line in this song that really kind of spoke to me and that I wanted to base my book recommendation on. And that line is, "That's that little guy who spoke to me." So I wanted to try and find a book in which you have like a small, unassuming person speaking to power, which still, even with that as a prompt, was quite a hard one for me to do. However, I stumbled across The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. J.R.R. Tolkien. I can never say that quickly. And yes, in particular, thinking about the scene in which Bilbo Baggins confronts Smaug the dragon, he is this small, unassuming hobbit who is speaking to this very, very powerful, very big, very eager to eat him dragon. And he has to have a whole lot of confidence in himself to speak to this dragon who could eat him at any point. He could burn him alive at any point. And so yeah, this was the book that came to mind for me, of a little guy speaking to power and the consequences of that. The next song in Hamilton is The Adams Administration. This is another shorter song in Hamilton in which we see how George Washington has stepped aside, John Adams has come in, and Hamilton's career is starting to dissolve and go down because he does not like John Adams at all. In the musical, John Adams ends up firing Hamilton, and in response, Hamilton sends out this damning indictment of John Adams' presidency, and he has now put himself in a very precarious position. And it's at this moment that Jefferson, Madison, and Burr decide that they are going to let Hamilton know that they've uncovered his secrets. So my book recommendation for this is going to be one of those tenuous links, but I want you to go with me on this journey. I am going to be recommending Shopaholic Abroad by Sophie Kinsella. I promise you, I do have a justification for this. So this is the second book in the Shopaholic series, and in this book, Becky Bloomwood ends up getting into so much hot water when her original bank manager retires. She started to really build rapport and a relationship with her bank manager when he announces that he is going to retire, but that his replacement bank manager is known for being a lot more harsh on people who are in debt. So he is warning her that she really needs to toe the line and that she needs to make sure that she pays her debts on time, and of course it's Becky, she's a shopaholic, she doesn't do that, and therefore she gets into a lot of deep trouble. And through the course of this book, many of her secret shames end up being revealed very, very publicly. In a similar way to how Hamilton's world gets turned upside down when he has a new manager, a new president who he does not agree with, and how his life and all of his secrets start to get uncovered by this new regime. See, I told you I could justify this. So because I think I'm going to have to split this video up into two, I'm just going to do one more of these songs from Act 2, and it is We Know. This is the song in which Jefferson, Madison and Burr reveal to Hamilton that they know that he's been extorting money. Or at least that's what they think that he's doing. And this is the moment where Hamilton has to defend himself, and he ends up revealing his affair with Reynolds. Whilst he manages to extract a promise from the three men that they are not going to reveal anything, he ends ends up being very insecure about the fact that these very, very powerful men hold such a big secret over him. So for this, I wasn't really sure what book to recommend, but then I stumbled upon this one and thought it was perfect. The idea that getting into an affair can have disastrous consequences, and this goes to the extreme in that, and it is 1984 by George Orwell. Maybe it's a bit reductionist to boil this down to man gets into an affair and disastrous political consequences arise, but that's how I'm going to justify this for this prompt, because it was kind of hard to think of a book for this. The next song in Hamilton is Hurricane, in which Hamilton is reflecting on his life and also reflecting on whether or not he should reveal his secret affair with Maria Reynolds. He's really struggling with the idea of making this public, but at the same time he knows that Jefferson, Madison and Burr have this secret and he does not want them to have power that they can hold over him. He reflects on his life and the amount of times that writing has really come to his aid, the way that he has been able to write himself out of terrible, dire situations. And this concept of writing your way out of a terrible situation is something that I really latched onto. So I was trying to find a book that had this concept, and I actually found it a bit of a struggle. I initially thought about using Kerry Hudson's Lowborn, which is her memoir of getting out of poverty and then returning back to these old places that she used to live in. Since Kerry Hudson did become a writer, and technically you could say that she did write her way out of her situation. However, I actually think that the book that fits much better for this is How to Build a Girl by Caitlin Moran. This is semi-autobiographical to Caitlin Moran's life and deals with a young teenage girl who is trying to make her mark upon the world, and she's trying to get out of her family situation and make a name for herself, and she does it based on her writing. It's this story of this young girl getting out of her family situation, growing a career for herself and trying to reinvent herself, which is definitely, I think, something that you can see in Hurricane and in Alexander Hamilton's life. The next song is the Reynolds pamphlet, in which we see how Alexander Hamilton did end up releasing the details of his sordid affair with Maria Reynolds to the public. And can I just point out in like very explicit detail and over like 90 pages, like why was that necessary, Alexander? So of course all of his family are absolutely horrified with this and really mad at him, as they should be. Meanwhile, his rivals are absolutely ecstatic that this has been made public, because now they do not have to worry about him being president because nobody's going to vote for him now. So the book that sprang to mind for me was So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson, which really does what it says on the tin. It goes through multiple different cases of incidents in which people have been very publicly shamed for a misdemeanor, how their lives were very deeply affected, particularly like personal relationships, their career prospects, but also in some cases how they were able to bring things back. I think if Alexander Hamilton had been living now, this would definitely have been a book that he turned to. The next song is Burn, which once again is another Eliza song. We know that I love Eliza, and in this one she is absolutely devastated after finding out about Alexander Hamilton's affair with another woman. She is saddened and angry not only about the affair but also the fact that he made this very public and has brought down her and her family by extension. She's so humiliated and angry, and we see in this song how she burns all of his correspondence with her. Now, we do not know for sure whether or not this was how things went down, but this is really the musical trying to narratively cover a big gap in the historiography around Hamilton. We do not have the correspondence between Eliza and Hamilton, at least particularly for this time period, and so I immediately thought of Miss Austen by Gill Hornby. This recounts the story of Cassandra Austen, who was Jane's sister. And Cassandra is very disliked by a lot of Jane Austen scholars because we know that she destroyed a good 2/3 of the correspondence of Jane Austen. This is really Gill Hornby trying to get inside Cassandra's head and kind of give an explanation as to why this wasn't a malicious thing that she was doing, that she was caring for her sister by destroying this correspondence. So I think you can definitely see parallels to Hamilton's Burn and Miss Austen in this covering up, trying to destroy evidence kind of way. The next song is Blow Us All Away, and we are really getting into the really sad part of Hamilton right now. In this song we see the perspective of Philip Hamilton, who is Hamilton's son, and he is 19 years old, he's bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, full of life. However, he gets very deeply offended by some comments that another man, George Orwell, makes about his father, and so challenges him to a duel. And he's very nervous about the idea of this duel going ahead. However, after he speaks to his father, Alexander Hamilton makes the decision that he's not going to shoot George Orwell. He is instead going to raise his pistol at the sky, and hopefully this will mean that the duel will not go on. However, unfortunately, Philip raises his pistol towards the sky and George shoots him anyway. For this book recommendation, I thought immediately of the memoir When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. This tells the story of Paul Kalanithi, who worked very, very hard to become a brain surgeon. However, very close to the time that he is able to qualify and be a proper neurosurgeon, he finds out that he has got inoperable lung cancer. It's another absolutely devastating story about somebody who is in the prime of life, where they're about to get everything that they ever wanted, and then they are cut down. This was a book that absolutely devastated me. I was actually crying on the underground when I was reading this because it just affected me so much. And you can definitely see the parallels between Philip Hamilton and the tragedy of his death and the tragedy of Paul Kalanithi's passing. The next song is the Stay Alive reprise, in which Hamilton and Eliza are comforting their son Philip as he dies in their arms, and it's a really, really devastating song, and I cry every single time. For this, I feel like there was only one option, and it is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This tells the story of William Shakespeare's family, particularly of Hamnet, his son, who died of bubonic plague when he was about 11, 13 years old. So once again, you can immediately see the parallels. We've got this young son of this big, prominent man, and how that really is such a devastating loss. Yeah, another book that deals with child bereavement and is absolutely devastating to read. Next up, we've got another sad song. It is It's Quiet Uptown, in which Alexander Hamilton and Eliza are grieving the loss of their son. However, we do get to see a little ray of hope and happiness as they do start to reconcile. This, I think, was another book in which Hamnet could have worked very, very well, but I wanted to go for a different book about grief, so I have gone for Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter. In this, we've got the story of two boys and their father who are grieving the loss of their mother. This is based around Ted Hughes's crow, and they have a crow-like figure who comes to them and is kind of pestering them in their grief. And it's really another book about coming to terms with grief and bereavement. However, it does offer this glimmer of hope that this feeling of absolute devastation and anguish is not the only step in the grieving process, that you will come out of that eventually. It's a book that is both devastating in parts, but also has moments of hilarity, which I think we always need to remember, that there are these moments of lightness even when you are in the depths of your grief. The next song is The Election of 1800. In this, we have Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr competing for the presidency. In this song, Hamilton is being asked who is he going to vote for between Jefferson and Burr, since his own party candidate John Adams has no chance of re-election. And despite the fact that he has been arguing with Thomas Jefferson since the moment he met him, Hamilton decides that he's going to put his vote with Jefferson, with the justification that even though he disagrees with so many of Jefferson's policies and ideas, at least Jefferson has beliefs, whereas Aaron Burr likes to sidestep everything and never commits himself to a cause. And Burr feels absolutely betrayed by this because he knows how often Jefferson and Hamilton have been at each other's throats. So why has Hamilton decided to go for this man that he hates over him? Once again, another book recommendation that was really hard to pin down. However, I decided to go for Matilda, Empress Queen Warrior by Catherine Hanley. This is a book that I've read recently which talks about the Empress Matilda, who should have been a Queen of England. However, this got taken from her. I've ranted about this enough, I'm not going to go into it, but I'm really, really cross about it still, even though it happened like 900 years ago. But I think this really does reflect this feeling of betrayal. I feel like Matilda was probably just so shocked that the nobles went against her father's wishes and that they went against the promise that they made to support her claim. I feel like Burr could probably really heavily relate to that feeling, that this position of power that he thought was so surely going to be his ends up being given to somebody else. Did I mainly recommend this because I want more people to read it? Yes, I did. Read this. It's so good. Coming up to the end of the musical, we have the next song, which is Your Obedient Servant. This is a song which is basically an interaction of letters between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, in which Burr finally challenges Hamilton to the fatal duel. And for this, I was trying really, really desperately to think of a book recommendation, and I was trying to think of a book that is epistolary. I can never say that word. A book told in letters, but particularly between two people who are very witty and maybe two people who are enemies, and I just couldn't think of anything for this. However, I remembered that I had this book written in history, which is Letters That Changed the World. And in this book, we have The letters transcribed between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, the fateful letters that sealed Alexander Hamilton's fate. We also have the letters between William Van Ness and Nathaniel Pendleton, who I believe were Burr and Hamilton's seconds. And yeah, I was so pleased when I remembered that I had this. This also has other important prominent letters through history, and it's a really, really interesting read. I highly recommend this. The next song is Best of Wives and Best of Women. This is a little tiny little transitional song in which Eliza is seeing that Hamilton is still up very, very late at night, the night before his duel. She doesn't know anything about this and he has not told her. She's trying to encourage him to come back to bed, come back to sleep, and he's saying, no, I need to just write something down quickly. However, just before Eliza leaves, he grabs her hand and he says, hey, Best of Wives and Best of Women, which is referring to something that Alexander Hamilton did actually call his wife in correspondence. And so the book that came to mind for me was The Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood. This is the story of the Odyssey as told by his wife Penelope. I thought this fit really, really well because we're talking about a forgotten, often maligned woman in a very, very big, famous, prominent story. Because Penelope often just gets ignored as like this weeping, crying woman, whereas, you know, she had so much to deal with. She had to suffer so much because of Odysseus's absence, and I feel like you can say the same for Eliza. She had to deal with so much because of Alexander Hamilton. So once again, book about the great women who often get ignored. Okay, we are now on to the penultimate song in Hamilton. We have The World Was Wide Enough. This is the fateful dueling scene between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, in which, unfortunately, our favourite Hamilton ends up being shot and killed by Burr. At the beginning of the song, it's told primarily through Burr, and we're really getting into his mindset as to why he thought he had to shoot Hamilton and why he thought that Alexander Hamilton was going to be shooting to kill him too. But then just as the fateful moment occurs, we end up flashing into Alexander Hamilton's mindset, and we're really getting this moment where his life starts to flash before his eyes, and he goes on this little bit of a monologue which is completely unscored. There is no music. He does this completely a cappella. And the book that really sprung to mind for me was 10 minutes 38 seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak. This tells the story of Layla, who has just been murdered and kind of left in a dumpster to die, but flashes through the 10 minutes 38 seconds while she lies dying and really flashes through the events of her life. It's a very, very strange book, but really does reflect this theme of your life flashing behind your eyes and what have you done with your life. Thinking about the things that went well and your regrets and who you are leaving behind. Because whilst this 10 minute 38 seconds is going, her friends are rushing trying to find where she has gone. Like I say, really interesting, weird little book. And then the final song in Hamilton is actually my favourite, I think. It is Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story, in which the ensemble are kind of reflecting on Alexander Hamilton's life and what he was able to bring to the US and the foundation of America. How he has often been neglected in history because of the fact that he died so young. However, the fact that his legacy was perpetuated through his wife Eliza. And this is where my baby Eliza takes centre stage, and she talks about the next 50 years of her life where she really tried to preserve and uphold Hamilton's legacy. She went through all of his papers, she raised money for the Washington Monument, she spoke out against slavery, she opened one of the first orphanages in New York City, and it's just this beautiful, beautiful moment. This is, like I say, one of my favourite songs in the whole musical, and I cry every single time I see it. So I feel like there is no other book that I could recommend for this but the Alexander Hamilton biography by Ron Chernow. Because arguably, this is Eliza's legacy. The fact that she went out of her way to really preserve her husband's legacy after he died. We might not have this biography and therefore might not have this musical without her. In fact, I think it's fair to say we would not have any of this without her. Like, it is a chunky boy, but honestly, worth every page. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed reading this, and if you haven't picked this up yet and you are a Hamilton fan, I highly, highly recommend it. So we have come to the end. This is the end of the musical and the end of the book recommendations. Oh, I'm so sad. I hope you've enjoyed this little walk through all of the songs in Hamilton and all of my book recommendations. I'd love to hear from you any book recommendations that you would swap out for any of these songs, because as I said in my previous videos, this is very, very subjective to the books that I have read, which are limited in terms of how well they can fit into particular songs. So if you have anything that you think would work even better, do let me know. I'd love to hear from you. I hope that you are having a fantastic day, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye!